The email arrived at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday that had already stretched too long, and when I saw William's name in my inbox with the subject line, Special Assignment, Confidential, my stomach did that familiar flip it always did when my boss needed something from me. Comment below where you're listening from. I'd love to know if anyone else has ever felt their heart race just from seeing their boss's name pop up on their screen. I clicked open the message, expecting another late-night presentation or weekend conference call, but instead found myself staring at words that made my carefully constructed professional world tilt sideways. Jeffrey, need you to accompany me to Velvet tonight for a crucial client meeting. Dress code is upscale casual. This is sensitive. We'll need to blend in with the regular clientele. Can you handle this? Velvet. I knew the name, of course. It was the city's most exclusive gay bar, the kind of place I'd driven past countless times, but never had the courage to enter. The kind of place where successful men like me could supposedly be themselves, if they were brave enough to walk through those doors. I'd been telling myself for months that I'd go someday, when the time was right, when I felt ready, when I could figure out how to reconcile the version of myself that existed in boardrooms with the version that existed in my private thoughts. And now William Chun, my straight, recently divorced, devastatingly attractive boss, was asking me to go there with him. For business. I read the email 3 more times, each pass making my pulse quicken for different reasons. The professional part of my brain immediately understood the implications. William needed me there as his wingman, his straight colleague who could help him navigate an unfamiliar environment to secure what was undoubtedly a major deal. He trusted me enough to bring me into sensitive business, which should have felt like a career victory. But the other part of my brain, the part I'd been carefully suppressing for the better part of my 32 years, was spinning with entirely different thoughts. I'd be walking into a gay bar with William Chun. The William Chun who rolled up his sleeves during long strategy sessions, revealing forearms that made me lose my train of thought. The William Chun who'd been coming to work looking slightly lost and vulnerable ever since his divorce finalized 2 months ago, a combination that made him even more attractive than his usual confident self. I pushed back from my desk and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline while trying to process what this assignment really meant. For 3 years, I'd worked closely with William, building a professional relationship based on mutual respect and shared ambition. He was brilliant, demanding, and had a way of making everyone around him want to exceed their own expectations. He was also completely unaware that I spent most of our one-on-one meetings fighting the urge to stare at his mouth when he talked, or that I'd developed an embarrassing habit of staying late just to catch glimpses of him working alone in his office. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was finally going to set foot in a gay bar, but only as part of an elaborate performance. I'd be pretending to be gay while actually being gay, all while sitting next to the man who'd been the unwitting star of my private fantasies for months. The complexity of it made my head spin. I walked back to my computer and started typing a response, then deleted it. Started again, deleted again. How do you respond professionally to a request that feels like it could either destroy your career or change your life? How do you say yes to something that terrifies and excites you in equal measure? The truth was, I'd been living in a carefully constructed closet for so long that I'd almost forgotten what it felt like to want something this badly. I'd built my entire adult life around being the perfect employee, the reliable colleague, the guy who never caused drama or made waves. I'd dated women sporadically, enough to maintain appearances, but never seriously enough to hurt anyone when things inevitably fizzled out. I'd perfected the art of being present but invisible, engaged but not too engaged, successful but not threatening. And now William was asking me to step into the one space where that careful construction might crumble completely. My phone buzzed with a text from him. Jeffrey, did you get my email? Need to know ASAP if you're available tonight. This client could change everything for our division. I stared at the message, knowing that my response would set something in motion that I couldn't control or predict. William needed me there for business, but I needed to be there for reasons I couldn't even fully articulate to myself. The thought of walking into Velvet with him, of sitting close enough to smell his cologne while pretending to be something I actually was, felt like the universe offering me a chance I'd been too afraid to take on my own. I typed back quickly before I could change my mind. Got it. I'll be ready. What time should we meet? His response came immediately. Pick you up at 8. And Jeffrey, thanks for this. I know it's outside your comfort zone, but I trust you completely. Trust. The word hit me harder than it should have, because he was right. This was so far outside my comfort zone that I couldn't even see the boundaries anymore. But he trusted me, and maybe that was enough to help me trust myself, at least for one night. I spent the rest of the afternoon in a state of controlled panic, trying to focus on quarterly reports while my mind raced through every possible scenario for how the evening might unfold. By the time I left the office, I'd convinced myself that this was just another business assignment, albeit an unusual one. I'd be professional, supportive, and completely invisible in the way I'd perfected over the years. But as I stood in front of my closet at home, trying to decide what upscale casual meant for a gay bar I'd never entered, I couldn't shake the feeling that tonight was going to change everything, whether I was ready for it or not. The next morning arrives with William's signature confidence filling my office doorway. He's holding 2 coffee cups and wearing that easy smile that's been my professional weakness for months. I've barely slept, my mind spinning through every possible scenario of tonight's assignment. But I force myself to appear calm and collected. Morning, Jeffrey. Ready for our briefing? He sets 1 coffee on my desk, black, no sugar, exactly how I take it. The fact that he remembers this small detail sends an unwelcome flutter through my chest. Absolutely. Tell me more about this client. I take a sip, grateful for something to do with my hands. William settles into the chair across from my desk, and I notice he looks different somehow. Less polished than usual, more relaxed. There's something in his posture that suggests the divorce has lifted a weight from his shoulders rather than crushing him under it. Mason Chun. He's the CEO of Pacific Dynamics, and he's worth about $50 million to us if we can secure his tech marketing account. William pulls out his phone, showing me a professional headshot of an impeccably dressed Asian man in his 40s. Smart guy, built his company from nothing. But here's the thing. He's very particular about who he does business with. He wants to work with people he trusts, people who understand authenticity. The word authenticity hits me like a physical blow. I set down my coffee carefully. And he conducts business at Velvet? It's his regular spot. Friday nights, usually around 9. He likes the atmosphere there. Says it's one of the few places where people can't hide behind corporate facades. William's eyes meet mine, and I see something I haven't noticed before. There's no discomfort when he talks about the gay bar, no awkwardness or jokes. Just matter-of-fact professionalism. So we need to blend in. I repeat slowly, testing the words. Exactly. Look, Jeffrey, I know this isn't exactly a typical client meeting. But Mason specifically mentioned that he appreciates when business partners can step outside their comfort zones. He's gay, he's proud of it, and he wants to work with people who respect that part of his life. William leans forward slightly. I trust you completely with this. You're the best at reading people, at making clients feel comfortable. If anyone can help me navigate this successfully, it's you. The irony is so thick I could choke on it. Here's William, asking me to help him navigate a gay bar, to help him pretend to be something I actually am. I want to laugh, or cry, or possibly both. What exactly does blending in mean? I ask, though I'm afraid I already know the answer. William runs a hand through his hair, and I catch a glimpse of vulnerability that makes my heart skip. Well, we'll need to look like we belong there. Like we're together. He says the last word carefully, watching my reaction. Mason's assistant mentioned that he usually brings his partner to these informal meetings. He likes to see how couples interact, says it tells him a lot about character. My mouth goes dry. Together. As in dating. Maybe more than dating. William's cheeks actually color slightly, and it's endearing in a way that makes my chest tight. Look, I know it's asking a lot, but we just need to be convincing for a few hours. Hold hands, maybe dance if he suggests it. Nothing too dramatic. Hold hands. Dance. With William. In a gay bar. While pretending to be gay. When I actually am gay. And attracted to him. This is either the universe's idea of a cosmic joke or the most exquisite torture imaginable. I can do that. I hear myself saying, though my voice sounds strange to my own ears. For the client, of course. Of course. William's smile is grateful and warm. I have to admit, I'm a little nervous about it. Grace always said I was hopeless at dancing, and now I'm going to have to dance with you in front of a potential $50 million client. The mention of Grace, his ex-wife, creates an unexpected pang in my chest. I realize I don't know much about his divorce, only that it happened 6 months ago, and that he seemed lighter since then. More himself, somehow. Grace, I say carefully. Is she okay with you taking on assignments like this? William's expression shifts, becomes more thoughtful. Grace and I are divorced, Jeffrey. What I do professionally isn't really her concern anymore. He pauses, then adds quietly. Besides, she always said I needed to be more open to new experiences. Guess she was right about that. There's something in his tone that makes me look at him more closely. He's not wearing his wedding ring anymore. I noticed that weeks ago, but there's something else different about him. He seems more comfortable in his own skin, less like he's performing the role of successful married executive, and more like he's just. William, how are you handling the divorce? I ask, then immediately worry I've overstepped. I mean, if you don't mind me asking. Actually, it's been. He searches for the right word. Liberating. I know that sounds terrible, but Grace and I had been growing apart for years. We just weren't right for each other anymore. Maybe we never were. He meets my eyes directly. Sometimes you realize you've been living someone else's idea of what your life should look like. The weight of his words settles between us. I know exactly what he means, though I can't tell him that. I've been living someone else's idea of what my life should look like for years. The straight, successful, uncomplicated executive. The man who dates women occasionally and never lets anyone get too close. That must have been difficult to realize, I say softly. It was, but also necessary. William stands, straightening his tie. Which brings us back to tonight. I figure if I'm going to step outside my comfort zone, I might as well do it with someone I trust. Someone who won't judge me if I'm completely hopeless at this. If only he knew how impossible it would be for me to judge him for anything. If only he knew that spending an evening pretending to be his boyfriend might be the closest I'll ever get to something I've wanted for months. What should I wear? I ask, because it's a safer question than the ones really on my mind. Something that says confident but not trying too hard. Mason's crowd is upscale, but not flashy. Think expensive casual. William heads toward the door, then turns back. And Jeffrey? Thank you. I know this is above and beyond the usual client entertainment. I won't forget this. After he leaves, I sit in my office staring at my coffee, my mind racing. Tonight, I'll walk into a gay bar with William. I'll hold his hand, maybe dance with him, pretend to be his boyfriend. And somehow, I'll have to do all of this while keeping my real feelings completely hidden. The most terrifying part isn't that I might give myself away. It's that I might discover something about William that changes everything. The bass thrummed through the polished concrete floor as Jeffrey stepped into Velvet, the upscale gay bar that had somehow become the unlikely venue for the most important business meeting of his career. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over exposed brick walls, and the crowd was a sophisticated mix of professionals and artists, everyone dressed to impress. Jeffrey's heart hammered against his ribs as he took in the scene. Men laughing together at the bar, couples dancing on the sleek floor, the easy intimacy he'd only dreamed of experiencing himself. Not what I expected, William murmured beside him, his voice carrying a note of genuine appreciation rather than judgment. He'd changed into dark jeans and a fitted navy shirt that made his eyes look impossibly blue, and Jeffrey had to force himself to focus on scanning the room for Mason rather than stealing glances at his boss. What were you expecting? Jeffrey asked, surprised by his own boldness. The atmosphere of the bar seemed to strip away some of his usual professional reserve. William's smile was thoughtful. Something less elegant, I guess. Grace always said I had limited imagination about things outside my experience. He paused, something flickering across his face at the mention of his ex-wife. She was right about a lot of things. They found a high-top table with a clear view of the entrance, and William ordered them drinks, whiskey neat for himself, gin and tonic for Jeffrey. The casual way William remembered his preference sent an unexpected warmth through Jeffrey's chest. As they waited for Mason to arrive, Jeffrey found himself hyper-aware of every detail. The way William's fingers drummed against his glass, the subtle cologne that mixed with the bar's ambient scent of cedar and citrus, the easy confidence William projected even in this unfamiliar environment. You seem comfortable here, Jeffrey observed, testing the waters. William's laugh was self-deprecating. I'm comfortable anywhere there's good whiskey and interesting people. Besides, he met Jeffrey's eyes directly. I trust you to navigate this better than I could alone. The weight of that trust settled heavily on Jeffrey's shoulders. If only William knew how desperately Jeffrey wanted to navigate this, not as a business arrangement, but as something real. The irony was almost suffocating. Here he was, finally in a gay bar, finally in a space where he could theoretically be himself, and it was all pretense. "There's Mason," William said, nodding toward the entrance where a distinguished man in his 50s had just arrived, greeting the bartender with obvious familiarity. Mason Chun was exactly as Jeffrey had imagined, impeccably dressed, radiating the kind of confidence that came from building a business empire from nothing. He spotted them immediately and approached with a warm smile. "William, I presume?" Mason extended his hand. "And this must be Jeffrey. I've heard excellent things about your team's work." As they shook hands and exchanged pleasantries, Jeffrey felt William's presence beside him like a magnetic field. When Mason suggested they move to a more comfortable seating area, William's hand found the small of Jeffrey's back, guiding him through the crowd. The touch was light, professional, meant to sell their cover story, but Jeffrey's entire nervous system lit up like a Christmas tree. They settled into a curved booth that encouraged intimacy, and Mason wasted no time diving into business. But Jeffrey found it increasingly difficult to focus on market projections and brand positioning when William kept unconsciously mirroring his movements, leaning closer when Jeffrey spoke, nodding with genuine interest at his ideas. The way William looked at him during the presentation, with respect, admiration, something that felt almost like pride, made Jeffrey's chest tight with longing. "You two work well together," Mason observed during a lull in the conversation. "How long have you been a couple?" The question hung in the air for a heartbeat too long. Jeffrey's throat went dry, but William answered smoothly. "About 6 months now," he said, and then did something that nearly stopped Jeffrey's heart entirely. He reached over and took Jeffrey's hand, threading their fingers together with casual intimacy. "We kept it quiet at first. You know how it is with workplace relationships." Jeffrey stared down at their joined hands, William's thumb absently stroking across his knuckles. The touch was electric, sending shockwaves up his arm and straight to his core. He managed to nod and murmur agreement, but inside he was falling apart. This was exactly what he'd fantasized about during countless sleepless nights, and it was happening for all the wrong reasons. "I can always tell when a couple has genuine chemistry," Mason said with approval. "It's in the small gestures, the way you anticipate each other's needs." "Grace mentioned you'd recently gone through some personal changes, William. I'm glad to see you found happiness." William's grip on Jeffrey's hand tightened almost imperceptibly. "Sometimes the best things come when you're not looking for them," he said quietly, and something in his voice made Jeffrey's breath catch. When he looked up, William was watching him with an intensity that seemed to see right through him. The music shifted to something slower, more intimate, and couples began gravitating toward the dance floor. Mason glanced over with interest. "I love watching people dance," he said. "You can tell so much about a relationship by how partners move together. The trust, the communication, it's all there in the body language." Jeffrey felt heat creep up his neck. Dancing with William would be torture of the most exquisite kind, but he could see the calculation in William's eyes. This was about the deal, about proving their authenticity to Mason. Jeffrey steeled himself for the performance of his life. "Would you like to dance?" William asked, his voice soft enough that Mason had to lean in to hear. Jeffrey nodded, not trusting his voice. William stood and offered his hand, and Jeffrey took it, letting himself be led to the dance floor. The song was something soulful and slow, and when William's arms came around him, Jeffrey thought he might dissolve entirely. They moved together tentatively at first, finding their rhythm. William's hand was warm and steady on Jeffrey's lower back, and Jeffrey could feel the solid strength of his chest, could smell his cologne mixed with something uniquely him. This close, Jeffrey could see the fine lines around William's eyes, the slight stubble along his jaw, the way his lips parted slightly as he concentrated on the music. "You're a good dancer," William murmured, his breath warm against Jeffrey's ear. "So are you," Jeffrey managed, his voice rougher than intended. They swayed together, and Jeffrey felt something shift between them. William's hand pressed more firmly against his back, drawing him closer, and Jeffrey let himself melt into the embrace. For a moment, he forgot about Mason watching from their table, forgot about the business deal, forgot about everything except the man in his arms and the way William was looking at him like he was seeing something new and wonderful. William's eyes were dark in the dim light, searching Jeffrey's face with an intensity that made Jeffrey's pulse race. There was something vulnerable in his expression, something that looked almost like recognition. When William's thumb brushed along Jeffrey's cheek, Jeffrey's eyes fluttered closed, overwhelmed by the tenderness of the gesture. "Jeffrey," William whispered, and there was something in the way he said his name that made Jeffrey's heart stop. Not the professional courtesy he was used to, but something deeper, more personal. Something that sounded almost like wonder. When Jeffrey opened his eyes, William was still watching him, and the careful distance William usually maintained had vanished entirely. They were pressed together now, moving as one, and Jeffrey could feel the rapid beat of William's heart against his chest. The pretense was dissolving, replaced by something raw and real and terrifying. The song ended, but they didn't immediately separate. For a suspended moment, they stood there in each other's arms, the rest of the world fading away. Jeffrey saw his own longing reflected in William's eyes, and for one wild second, he thought William might kiss him right there on the dance floor. Then reality crashed back. They were supposed to be performing, selling a story to Mason. But as they reluctantly stepped apart and returned to their table, Jeffrey couldn't shake the feeling that what had just happened between them had been anything but performance. Mason Chun arrived precisely at 9:30, his silver hair catching the ambient lighting as he surveyed the crowd with the practiced eye of someone who'd been conducting business in unconventional venues for decades. He moved through the bar with quiet authority, his tailored suit somehow perfectly at home among the leather jackets and designer casual wear. When he spotted us at our corner table, his smile was warm but assessing. "William, Jeffrey," he said, extending his hand to each of us in turn. "I appreciate you meeting me here. I know it's not the typical boardroom setting." "Not a problem at all," William replied, his voice steady despite the slight flush I noticed creeping up his neck. "We're comfortable anywhere that works for you." Mason's eyes lingered on us for a moment, and I felt that familiar flutter of anxiety mixed with something else. Something that had been building all evening as William's casual touches and lingering glances had begun to feel less like performance and more like invitation. The way William had kept his hand on my lower back while we waited, the way he'd leaned in close when speaking, ostensibly to be heard over the music, but creating an intimacy that felt dangerously real. "Excellent," Mason said, settling into the chair across from us. "I find that people reveal their true selves more readily outside the constraints of corporate environments. It's why I prefer to conduct my most important business here." He gestured around the bar, where couples swayed together on the small dance floor, their movements ranging from playful to deeply intimate. Authenticity is rare in our industry. When I find it, I value it highly. The word authenticity hit me like a physical blow. Here I was, pretending to be something I actually was, with a man I genuinely cared about, in a place where I'd always imagined I might finally feel free to be myself. The irony was almost suffocating. William's hand found mine on the table, his fingers intertwining with mine in a gesture that sent electricity straight through my chest. "Jeffrey and I understand the value of authenticity," he said, his thumb tracing small circles on my palm. "It's what makes partnerships work, whether in business or—" He paused, glancing at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "In life." Mason nodded approvingly. "How long have you two been together?" 6 months, William answered without hesitation, the same timeline we'd established earlier. But something in his voice made it sound less like a rehearsed line and more like a confession. "It's been transformative." I felt my breath catch. The way he said it, the slight roughness in his voice, the way his grip on my hand tightened slightly. It didn't feel like acting anymore. It felt like truth wrapped in fiction, and I wasn't sure which was which. "I can see that," Mason said, his shrewd eyes moving between us. "There's an energy between you that's quite genuine. In my experience, that kind of connection translates well to business partnerships too. People who trust each other implicitly, who can communicate without words, they make the best teams." As if to prove his point, the music shifted to something slower, more intimate. The dance floor filled with couples moving together in ways that spoke of real connection, real affection. Mason glanced toward the dancers, then back at us with a slight smile. "Would you mind if we continued our discussion out there?" he asked, nodding toward the dance floor. "I know it's unconventional, but I find that movement helps me think." And frankly, I'd like to see how you two move together. It tells me a lot about how you'll work together on this project. My heart hammered against my ribs. Dancing with William in front of our potential client. Maintaining the illusion of being a couple while battling my very real feelings for him. It felt like walking a tightrope over an abyss. But William was already standing, extending his hand to me with a smile that seemed to hold secrets I desperately wanted to understand. Of course, William said. Jeffrey loves to dance. Don't you, sweetheart? The endearment, delivered with such casual affection, nearly undid me. I managed to nod, taking his hand and allowing him to lead me toward the dance floor with Mason following behind us. The music wrapped around us, something soulful and slow that seemed to demand honesty from everyone it touched. William's arms came around me naturally, one hand settling on my waist while the other remained linked with mine. We'd never been this close before, never moved together like this, but somehow our bodies found a rhythm that felt like we'd been dancing together for years. His chest pressed against mine, solid and warm, and I could feel his heartbeat, rapid, matching my own. Relax, he murmured against my ear, his breath sending shivers down my spine. Just follow my lead. But as we moved together, something shifted. The pretense began to fall away, replaced by something raw and real. William's hand on my waist pulled me closer, his fingers splaying across my back in a way that felt possessive, protective. When I looked up at him, his eyes were dark with something that went far beyond professional necessity. Jeffrey, he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion I didn't dare name. I need you to know that what we're doing right now, it doesn't feel like pretending anymore. My breath caught in my throat. Around us, other couples swayed in their own private worlds, but I felt like William and I were the only people in the universe. William, I know we're supposed to be acting, he continued, his forehead nearly touching mine as we moved. I know this is all for Mason for the deal, but the way you feel in my arms, the way you're looking at me right now. He paused, his grip on me tightening. Tell me I'm not imagining this connection. I could barely breathe. This was the moment I'd been both dreading and hoping for all evening. The moment when the careful walls I'd built around my feelings for him threatened to crumble completely. In the dim lighting of the dance floor, with his body pressed against mine and his eyes searching my face for answers I wasn't sure I was brave enough to give, I felt more exposed than I ever had in my life. You're not imagining it, I whispered, the words escaping before I could stop them. William, you're not imagining any of it. Something flashed across his face, relief, desire, fear, hope, all tangled together in an expression so vulnerable it made my chest ache. His hand came up to cup my cheek, his thumb brushing across my skin in a gesture so tender it felt like a promise. God, Jeffrey, he breathed. What are we doing? Before I could answer, Mason appeared beside us, his expression pleased but professional. Gentlemen, I have to say, you two have a natural chemistry that's quite impressive. The way you move together, the way you communicate without words, it's exactly what I'm looking for in a partnership. William's hand remained on my cheek for a moment longer before he slowly let it fall, though he kept me close in his arms. We work well together, he said, his eyes never leaving mine. We understand each other. I can see that, Mason replied. In fact, I'm convinced. The Chun account is yours, William. Jeffrey, I look forward to working with both of you. This partnership is going to be very successful. The words should have filled me with triumph. We'd secured the deal, accomplished what we'd come here to do. But all I could focus on was the way William was still holding me. The way his eyes were dark with promises and possibilities that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with the connection we'd just acknowledged in the most public, most dangerous way possible. As Mason excused himself to take a phone call, William and I remained on the dance floor, still moving together to music that seemed to echo the rapid beating of our hearts. The deal was done, but something else was just beginning. Something that would change everything between us, something that could no longer be hidden behind the pretense of professional obligation. We should probably go, William said finally, though he made no move to release me. Probably, I agreed, though the thought of leaving this moment, this bubble of possibility we'd created, felt like losing something precious. But as we slowly separated, I caught the look in his eyes, a look that told me this wasn't ending here. that whatever we discovered on this dance floor was just the beginning of something neither of us could pretend away anymore. The music shifted to something slower, more intimate, and I expected William to step back, to return to our table where we could pretend the last few minutes had been nothing more than excellent acting. Instead, he moved closer, his hand finding the small of my back with a confidence that made my breath catch. "We should probably head back," I said, though my voice lacked any real conviction. My body betrayed me, leaning into his touch instead of pulling away. "Should we?" William's eyes searched mine, and I saw something there that made my heart race. A vulnerability I'd never seen in all our months of working together. Mason seemed satisfied with our performance. The way he said performance, with that slight hesitation, made me wonder if he was questioning it too. Around us, other couples swayed to the music, lost in their own worlds, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. Not because I was hiding or pretending, but because I was exactly where I was supposed to be. "Jeffrey," Williams said, his voice softer now, barely audible over the music. "Can I ask you something?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "How did you know?" "Earlier, when you said this felt real, how did you know I would understand what you meant?" The question hung between us, loaded with implications that terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. This was the moment I'd been dreading and hoping for since we'd walked into Velvet tonight. William wasn't just asking about our dance or our chemistry. He was asking about something deeper, something that could change everything between us. "I didn't know," I admitted, my hand unconsciously tightening on his shoulder. "I hoped maybe, but I didn't know." "What made you hope?" I thought about all the small moments over the past months, the way William's eyes would linger on me during meetings, the casual touches that lasted just a beat too long, the way he'd seemed almost relieved when he'd mentioned his divorce. But mostly, I thought about tonight, about how naturally he'd slipped into this role, how comfortable he seemed in my world. "The way you looked at me when we were dancing," I said finally, "like you were seeing me for the first time, and the way you didn't flinch when I moved closer. Most straight men would have created distance, would have made it clear they were just playing a part." William was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing small circles on my back through my shirt. The gesture was so intimate, so unconscious, that I wondered if he even realized he was doing it. "What if I told you," he said slowly, "that I haven't been sure about a lot of things lately? About who I am, what I want, what I've been pretending not to feel." My heart hammered against my ribs. "What would you want me to say to that?" "That I'm not crazy. That tonight wasn't just about the deal for you either." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of years of careful hiding, of measured responses and calculated distances. When I opened them, William was watching me with an intensity that made me feel exposed and safe at the same time. "It wasn't just about the deal," I said. "It hasn't been just about work for a long time." The admission hung between us, honest and terrifying. William's hand stilled on my back, and for a moment I thought I'd gone too far, revealed too much. But then he pulled me closer, eliminating the last few inches of space between us. "I've been thinking about this for months," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "About you. About what it would feel like to stop pretending I don't notice the way you look at me, the way I look at you when I think no one's watching." "William." "Grace knew," he continued, the words tumbling out like he'd been holding them back for too long. "She knew before I did. She said I looked at you the way I used to look at her, back when we were happy. She said I lit up when you walked into a room, that I found excuses to work late when you were staying late." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. All this time, I'd thought I was the only one carrying this secret, the only one struggling with feelings that had no place in our professional relationship. But William had been fighting the same battle, questioning everything he thought he knew about himself. "Is that why you divorced?" I asked. "Part of it. We'd been growing apart for years, but realizing I was attracted to you. It made me understand that I'd been living a lie. Not just about my marriage, but about myself." The music around us faded into background noise as William's words sank in. This wasn't just about physical attraction or a moment of confusion. This was about identity, about the courage to acknowledge who we really were and what we really wanted. "I'm scared," I admitted, the words coming out in a whisper. "I've spent so long hiding who I am, keeping my work life and my personal life completely separate. If we do this, if we explore what's happening between us, everything changes. I know, William said. I'm scared too. I've never been with a man, never even admitted to myself that I wanted to be. But Jeffrey, what I felt during that dance, what I'm feeling right now, it's the most honest I've been in years. I looked into his eyes and saw my own fear reflected back at me, along with something else, hope. The same hope that had been growing in my chest since the moment he'd pulled me onto the dance floor. What do we do? I asked. William smiled, and it was different from any smile I'd seen from him before, vulnerable and real and completely without pretense. We take it slow. We figure it out together. We don't have to have all the answers tonight. And work. We'll be careful, professional. But Jeffrey, I can't go back to pretending I don't feel this. I can't go back to watching you from across the conference room and wishing I had the courage to tell you how I feel. The song was ending, couples around us beginning to separate and return to their tables. But William made no move to step away, and neither did I. We stood there, holding each other in the middle of the dance floor, both of us breathing hard like we'd just run a marathon. One more dance? William asked, his voice hopeful. I nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging my throat. As the next song began, slower and more intimate than the last, William pulled me close again. But this time, there was no pretense, no performance for Mason's benefit. This was just us, finally honest about what we wanted, finally brave enough to reach for it. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't hiding. I wasn't calculating angles or measuring responses. I was just Jeffrey, dancing with the man I'd been falling for, in a room full of people who understood exactly what it meant to find the courage to be authentic. And it felt like coming home. The music shifted to something slower, more intimate, and I found myself still in William's arms even though our business with Mason was complete. The deal was done, the handshakes exchanged, but neither of us seemed ready to break apart from this moment that had somehow become more real than anything either of us had planned. Jeffrey, William said softly, his breath warm against my ear as we swayed together. I need to tell you something, and I'm not sure how to say it without sounding like I've lost my mind. My heart hammered against my ribs. What is it? He pulled back slightly, just enough to look into my eyes, and I saw something there that made my breath catch. Vulnerability, yes, but also a kind of recognition that went deeper than our professional relationship, deeper than tonight's performance. The divorce, he began, his voice barely audible over the music. It wasn't just about Grace and me growing apart. It was about me finally admitting something I'd been fighting for months. His hands tightened slightly on my waist. Grace knew before I did. She told me the night she moved out that she'd been watching me look at you during meetings, watching me find excuses to stop by your office, watching me light up whenever you walked into a room. I felt the world tilt slightly. William, let me finish, he said, his thumb brushing against my hand where it rested on his shoulder. I told myself it was just admiration, professional respect. You're brilliant at what you do, and I convinced myself that's all it was. But Grace, she saw right through me. She said I looked at you the way I used to look at her, back when we first met. The confession hung between us like a bridge I wasn't sure I was brave enough to cross. Around us, the bar continued its lively rhythm, but we existed in our own bubble of honesty and fear. I've been questioning everything about myself for months, William continued. My marriage, my assumptions about who I am, what I want. And tonight, dancing with you, pretending to be something I thought I wasn't. He shook his head, a small smile playing at his lips. Except I wasn't pretending, was I? This feels more honest than anything I've done in years. I could barely breathe. The man I'd been attracted to for so long, the man I'd convinced myself was completely out of reach, was telling me that I'd been the catalyst for his own journey of self-discovery. The irony was almost overwhelming. While I'd been hiding my true self, I'd somehow helped him find his. Jeffrey, he said, and there was something almost desperate in his voice now. I need you to know that whatever this is between us, it's not some midlife crisis or rebound from my divorce. You've been in my head for months, and I was too scared to admit what that meant. I looked into his eyes, seeing the same fear and hope I'd been carrying around for so long. You want to know something? I said, finding my voice at last. I've been attracted to you since my second week at the company. I used to rehearse conversations with you in my head, find reasons to stay late when I knew you'd be working. I told myself it was hopeless, that you were straight and married and completely unavailable. And now, he asked, his voice soft. Now I'm terrified, I admitted. Because this isn't just attraction anymore. Tonight, seeing you here, seeing you be so open to this world that's been mine in secret for years. William, I think I'm falling for you, and that scares the hell out of me. He was quiet for a long moment, and I wondered if I'd said too much, revealed too much. But then he smiled, and it was the most genuine expression I'd ever seen from him. You know what's funny? He said. I came here tonight thinking I was doing this for the company, for the deal. But somewhere between walking through that door and holding you like this, I realized I was really doing it for me. For the chance to be honest about what I've been feeling. And what have you been feeling? I asked, though I was almost afraid to hear the answer. Like I've been living someone else's life, he said simply. Like I've been so focused on being who I thought I was supposed to be that I forgot to figure out who I actually am. But with you, Jeffrey, I feel like myself. Maybe for the first time in years. The song was ending, but neither of us moved to separate. Other couples shifted around us, but we remained locked in our own moment of truth. I don't know what this means for us, William said. I don't know how to navigate this at work, or what people will think, or how to even begin figuring out this part of myself. I've never been with a man before, never even seriously considered it until you. We don't have to figure it all out tonight, I said, though part of me wanted to. Part of me wanted to skip ahead to the part where we knew what we were to each other, where the uncertainty and fear gave way to something solid and real. But I want to try, he said, and the determination in his voice made my chest tight with hope. I want to figure it out with you, if you're willing to be patient with someone who's still learning who he is. I thought about all the years I'd spent hiding, all the careful compartmentalization of my life, all the loneliness that came with keeping such a fundamental part of myself secret. And here was William, offering me something I'd never dared to hope for, not just acceptance, but partnership and authenticity. I'm willing, I said, and meant it completely. But William, you should know that this isn't just experimentation for me. My feelings for you, they're real. They've been real for a long time. I know, he said, and there was something almost reverent in his voice. I can see it in your eyes. The same thing Grace saw in mine, I think. The same thing that scared me so much I tried to pretend it wasn't there. And now I'm still scared, he admitted. But I'm more scared of walking away from this, from you, than I am of figuring out what comes next. 3 weeks later, I found myself sitting across from William in a quiet corner booth at Romano's, the Italian place we'd discovered 2 blocks from the office. It had become our Thursday ritual, dinner after work, somewhere we could talk without the weight of our professional roles pressing down on us. Grace called yesterday, William said, twirling his pasta around his fork with the same careful precision he brought to everything. She wanted to know how I was doing with everything. I looked up from my own plate, noting the way his shoulders had relaxed over these past weeks. What did you tell her? The truth. He met my eyes, and I saw that familiar flicker of vulnerability that had first appeared on the dance floor at Velvet. That I'm figuring it out. That I'm scared as hell, but I'm figuring it out. The honesty still caught me off guard sometimes. After months of carefully constructed conversations about quarterly reports and client strategies, these moments of raw truth felt revolutionary. We'd established our boundaries early. No lingering touches in the office, no loaded glances during meetings, no hint of what was growing between us when others were around. But here, in this dimly lit restaurant, we could be ourselves. My sister wants to meet you, I said, surprising myself with the admission. I told her about us last weekend. William's fork paused halfway to his mouth. How did that go? Better than expected. She said she'd been wondering when I'd finally find someone worth talking about. I smiled, remembering Sarah's knowing look when I tried to downplay how much William meant to me. She's protective, but she's happy for me. And your parents? Not yet. I took a sip of wine, feeling the familiar knot of anxiety in my chest. But I'm thinking about it. This thing with you. It's making me want to stop hiding so much. William reached across the table, his fingers briefly touching mine before pulling back, a gesture that had become second nature to us, these small moments of connection we allowed ourselves. I know what you mean. I had lunch with my brother last week. Didn't tell him anything specific, but I mentioned I was dating someone new. First time I've talked about dating since the divorce. The weeks had been a careful dance of discovery. Weekend walks through the park where we could talk without interruption. Saturday morning coffee at the bookstore near William's apartment. Long phone calls after work where we shared pieces of ourselves we'd never shown anyone. William telling me about the moment he realized his marriage was over, not because he didn't love Grace, but because he couldn't be the person she needed him to be. Me confessing how lonely I'd been, how exhausting it was to edit myself constantly, to never let anyone see the real me. I keep thinking about that night, William said, his voice dropping to the intimate tone that made my pulse quicken. Dancing with you. The way everything just clicked. You mean when you realized you were actually gay? I teased gently, earning a laugh that transformed his whole face. When I realized I was falling for you, he corrected, and the simple honesty of it made my chest tight with emotion. Everything else was just details. We'd been taking things slow, both of us aware that we were navigating uncharted territory. William's inexperience with men made him cautious, while my own fear of workplace complications kept me careful. But there had been moments, his hand finding mine during a movie, the way he'd kissed me goodnight last Saturday with a tenderness that made me forget every reason we should be careful, that showed us both how deep this was running. Mason called me today, William said, changing the subject with the smooth transition that marked our return to safer ground. The campaign launch is exceeding expectations. He wants to discuss expanding the partnership. That's incredible. I felt a surge of pride, both for the professional success and for what we'd accomplished together. You were right about targeting that demographic. The authenticity angle really resonated. We were right, he corrected, and I saw the recognition in his eyes, that our collaboration had always been something special, even before we understood what it meant. We make a good team. The words hung between us, loaded with meaning that went far beyond business. We did make a good team. In the office, we'd found our rhythm again, our professional partnership somehow stronger now that we weren't hiding from each other. The tension that had once made meetings awkward had transformed into something productive, creative energy that our colleagues noticed without understanding. I've been thinking, William said, his voice carrying that note of careful consideration I'd learned to recognize. About us. About what we're building. My heart rate picked up, but I kept my expression neutral. Yeah. I know we agreed to take this slow, to keep things separate from work, and I think that's still smart. But I also think. He paused, running his hand through his hair in the gesture that had become endearingly familiar. I think I'm ready to stop treating this like it's temporary, like it's just something I'm experimenting with. The relief that flooded through me was overwhelming. William, I'm not saying we need to make some grand announcement or change everything overnight, but I want you to know that this isn't just me figuring myself out anymore. This is me choosing you. Choosing us. I reached across the table again, this time letting my hand cover his completely. I've been hoping you'd say that. I love you, he said simply, and the words settled between us like a promise. I know it's complicated, and I know we're still figuring out how to make this work, but I love you, Jeffrey. All of you. The professional you, the careful you, the you that dances with me in gay bars and makes me want to be braver than I've ever been. I love you too, I whispered, feeling the truth of it in every cell of my body. I've been in love with you for months, but I love this version of us even more. The honest version. We sat there for a moment, hands linked across the table, both of us smiling like idiots. Around us, the restaurant hummed with quiet conversation and clinking glasses, but it felt like we were in our own world. So what happens now? I asked. William's smile widened. Now we figure it out together. One Thursday dinner at a time. As we walked back to our cars later, William's hand brushed against mine in the darkness, and I felt the future stretching out before us. Uncertain, but full of possibility. We had work to navigate, families to talk to, a relationship to build from the ground up. But for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of the complexity. I was ready for the adventure.